Welcome to our deep dive into the source text today, where we are jumping straight into the cinematic, deeply emotional climax of what is literally a multi-generational family drama, Genesis 50. Now, if you've been following this family story, you already know their dynamics are, well, complicated is definitely an understatement. But right here, we finally get some resolution. We're talking a stunning display of grace, a monumental ancient funeral, and a massive cliffhanger that directly sets up the book of Exodus. Let's get into it. So the chapter opens right on the heels of Jacob's death. Obviously, Joseph is completely grief-stricken. But because of Joseph's incredible rank and status in Egypt, this is not your standard run-of-the-mill burial. He brings in specialized Egyptian physicians to embalm his father. And this wasn't just some quick process. It took exactly 40 days to complete the whole thing. But the mourning didn't stop there. 70 days. That is how long the entire nation of Egypt actually hit pause to mourn. Just think about the sheer scale of that for a second. This wasn't just Joseph weeping quietly in a tent somewhere. This was a massive, official state event. It really goes to show just how much absolute influence and respect Joseph had accumulated in this foreign land.
Which brings us to our first major turning point, the end of an era and a monumental journey home. Here's a quick roadmap of the three major events we're mapping out. First up, the mourning and burial of Jacob. Next, the brothers' fear and Joseph's forgiveness. And finally, the death of Joseph. So to fulfill Jacob's dying wish, Pharaoh literally permits a massive caravan of chariots, top dignitaries, and horsemen to travel all the way up to Canaan. It's a huge procession, and when they reach the border near the Jordan River, the mourning just reaches this absolute fever pitch. The grief was so intense for 7 full days that the local Canaanites actually renamed the place to mean grievous mourning of the Egyptians. Jacob is finally laid to rest in the exact same tomb as Abraham. The mission is accomplished. But returning to Egypt, well, that brings up a brand new, incredibly dark problem.
Which leads us right into the next phase. The tension peaks with fear and true forgiveness.
You see, Jacob was basically the glue holding this very fragile family together. With him gone, the brothers just spiral into absolute terror. They're terrified that Joseph has just been biding his time, waiting for the old man to die to finally exact his revenge. So they send this desperate message begging for grace, and then they physically throw themselves at his feet, volunteering to be his slaves. The bitter irony here is just palpable, isn't it? The very same brothers who sold him into slavery decades ago are now begging for it out of pure, unadulterated fear. But Joseph's response? It is incredibly profound. Remember, he has unchecked power in the greatest empire on earth right now. That is power usually used for brutal, swift retribution. Instead, he weeps. He tells them not to be afraid, and he asks them, "Am I in the place of God?" By choosing mercy over vengeance, Joseph does something truly revolutionary. He completely breaks the cycle of generational trauma in his family. It is an absolute masterclass in letting go of a grudge.
That brings us to the core of it all. The meaning and the providence of God.
Joseph's forgiveness isn't just about him deciding to be a nice guy. It's rooted in a massive worldview shift. Just look at verse 20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to save many lives. This right here, this is the theological centerpiece of the entire text.
It is such a stunning juxtaposition. On one hand, you have the harsh reality of human intent, driven by jealousy, driven by betrayal, actively intending to cause harm. But on the other hand, you have divine intent, and the text is incredibly careful with its words here. It doesn't say God just reacted, trying to make the best of a bad situation. No, it says God actually intended the ultimate outcome, positioning Joseph in Egypt to save the known world from a totally devastating famine.
This is the concept of divine providence in a nutshell. It's really the engine of this entire story. It teaches that God is sovereign even over the darkest human actions, weaving them together to accomplish good. Truly understanding this concept is exactly what allowed Joseph to let go of his right to revenge. He finally saw the much bigger picture.
And finally, we arrive at the end, the promise, which serves as a bridge to Exodus.
So decades pass. Joseph lives a really long, full life in Egypt, reaching 110 years of age. He even lives long enough to see his great-grandchildren brought up on his knees. But as his own death approaches, his focus shifts entirely away from the incredible wealth of Egypt and looks straight toward the future.
He gathers his family and tells them God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land. Then he makes them swear this absolutely crucial oath to carry his bones up out of Egypt whenever they eventually leave. By demanding his bones be moved later, he is laying down a massive prophetic anchor. He's essentially warning them, hey, do not get too comfortable here. This is not your true home. This beautifully connects the era of the patriarchs directly to the book of Exodus. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. It starts with Abraham, who initially buys the tomb in Canaan, then Jacob, who is carried back and buried there, then Joseph, whose bones will wait in a coffin in Egypt, and finally, hundreds of years later, when Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt, he specifically makes sure to take the bones of Joseph with him, perfectly fulfilling this exact oath.
So Joseph dies, he's embalmed, and he is placed in a coffin in Egypt. And there, that coffin sat for generations, just a silent, physical reminder of hope, waiting for the day of deliverance. It is the ultimate cliffhanger. So it leaves us with this thought. When you look at the darkest, most complicated moments in your own life, what are you waiting on to be woven together for good?